Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Nick, and I'm the marketing manager here at Accent Consulting. And I'm thrilled that you're able to join us for this informative session on AI. Now, you might fall in a few different areas when it comes to AI as a whole. Either you're an early adopter who's very interested or perhaps already integrating AI into your workflows, or maybe you're on the other side. You're very skeptical and not sure what this AI thing is all about, and maybe we should avoid it. What we find, though, in talking to business owners like you and business leaders is that they're usually somewhere in the middle. They're intrigued by the idea, fascinated by what AI could be, but they don't really know where it fits into their business context. So our goal today will be to show you how we're doing it here at Accent Consulting. We want to walk you through really where the ideas came from, what the use case was, the thinking that went into our solutions, how we developed those things, and then ultimately what the takeaways were. But spoiler alert, what we found is that AI is still a work in progress. It's adapting nearly as quickly as we're adapting to it. So a lot of these things are still in development. So I hope that you'll enjoy the conversation. We'll bring in a couple of our techs here in a minute to talk more about some of these use cases. I'll actually get to share one with you myself. But we hope that you enjoy this session. And I think the best place to start is with a question. All right, welcome in. Our first question today is basically, what the heck is an AI agent? So we brought in Mike, one of our top. What is your kind of day-to-day role here, like in terms of your expertise?
I'm in the systems and the network world. I see both sides of pretty much all the behind the curtain that you work with.
Gotcha. Okay, so with that as your context, how do you understand what an AI agent is? How can we explain it to our friends?
AI agent is going to do things that you don't want to keep doing, but you have to get done. It's really as simple as anything you repeat that doesn't change a bunch and has the same typical results, culminating a bunch of data, grabbing a bunch of numbers from spreadsheets, things like that.
So it's about taking that sort of monotonous, routine part of your workflow of your tasking and automating it in a certain way, right?
Exactly.
And is there a specific set of tools that you have to use, or how do you create an AI agent?
It's a good question. So it's kind of like a recipe. You need someone who knows the elements of just the whole system that you're looking for. And we basically put things in place to line up the results that you're looking for.
That's a great answer. Thanks so much, Mike. All right, so for our first example of AI use case development here at Accent, I'm actually going to tell you my own story. We're going to structure this conversation and all the rest in sort of like a five-pronged approach. I'm going to talk to you about the problem we were facing, the thinking that went into why AI might be able to solve it. We're going to talk about the solution that we developed, the results that we're seeing, and then kind of a final takeaway. So the first problem that we were facing in the marketing area actually is that we were onboarding new folks into our team for some outbound marketing and sales tasks, and training them was taking too long, and it was kind of inconsistent. This is a role that really relies a lot on iteration, having conversations, right? And so to do that, you just need to practice. But it's very difficult to sit in a room, with a person or two and just try to have these mock conversations over and over. But AI is actually really good at that. Your friends might judge you if you sit around and talk to AI all day, but it can actually be very helpful in terms of back and forth. And so really the thinking that went into why we could use AI started with a story that was shared by our owner and founder, Phil Wright. He worked a fast food job many years ago. It was his very first job. And we were talking about sort of the onboarding and the training. And almost as a joke, he said, well, we should do it VHS tapes, right? Because in his fast food job, they sat him down to 4 or 5 hours of VHS videos. And then by the time he was done, he was able to then go and be, a great fry cook or whatever else was needed. But, with that in mind, it was like, well, what if we sat them down and developed a tool that would give them all the knowledge that they needed and all of the examples and all of the conversation starters and allow them to sort of practice in that using AI. So the solution that we developed then was an onboarding tool that did three things. First off, it would give them some baseline knowledge, the things they needed to know to be successful. Then it would quiz them on those elements to make sure they had mastered the content and the learning there. And then the third phase was that they were able to then actually iterate conversationally using their own words and using their own language, but with the knowledge that they had gained in that module to then demonstrate their expertise. And so the results that we're seeing immediately are that our training time has been cut down by about 66%. We went from 3 days down to 1 day. So in terms of time and efficiency, we're off the charts in terms of improvement, which has been really spectacular. And the better part of it for us and for them, honestly, as well, is that rather than getting to the second week or the end of the first week before they could really start to do the job, they're doing it end of day one, beginning of day two. And the better part is if there's a part where they're struggling, I can send them back to the tool for retraining or just to kind of continue practicing an area where they're struggling. And so it's been great because it's not just a one-time thing either. They're actually able to then repeat through the process if necessary. So in terms of a big takeaway, I think the most clear thing for me and for us here at Accent is that you really have to start with a real business problem. AI is something that's great to experiment with, but as we've talked about, great AI starts with a great idea. So you've got to be able to really iterate through that and be able to, go through that process. And I'll be honest, I do have a little bit of coding background in my marketing experience. I'm the marketing manager here at Accent, but I'd never done anything like this with AI. And so once we had the conversation about the VHS tapes at the fast food restaurant, I took a work from home day and I cracked open my laptop early that morning and started in on this process, not really knowing anything, but working with AI and different tools and resources, with a little bit of help from our team as well. I was able to create this tool in just 1 day. It was sophisticated and functional. And yes, it's required continued iteration as people have used it, but we've now had multiple new hires go through this process. And they're delighted because they're able to get to work right away. And we're happy because they're working right away. But it wouldn't have been possible without this AI tool. So my insight for you and for really anyone else who is thinking about implementing AI at some place in their business process, start with a great idea and then do the work, understanding that you may not nail it the first time, but over time, you'll definitely be able to come up with a viable solution with the right guardrails in place. All right, Hayden is here. Hayden, how long have you been with Accent?
8 years.
8 years. And what is your role primarily day to day? What do you oversee?
Everything. Technically my position as a senior systems administrator, and over 8 years, there's a lot of different hats that I've had to start putting on. And
For sure.
um,
Excellent. So I just wanted to have that sort of context as we kind of get into this particular tool that you built. So the tool itself, we're calling a ticket exporter, kind of assistance agent, right? So walk us through kind of what the problem was. What was the challenge that we were facing?
So the problem is that a lot of the techs can have too many tickets to realistically, go through every ticket every day and make sure that it's adhering to like our different SLA agreements. Checking to see if there's anything that maybe needs to be bumped in priority, that sort of thing. So we just didn't really have enough time for all of that. So this tool allows us to augment, our time, our ability to look through all of our tickets and then see which ones you should fire down first.
Sure. So in summary, we get a lot of tickets, right? We have a lot of clients and their, problems and things that we need to resolve quickly, but it can often be difficult in the volume and the scale and the speed at which things come to understand what the top priority should be, right? So what was the thinking in bringing in AI to help solve this?
AI is another tool that we can leverage. It's a lot easier than trying to do something programmatically. So you can kind of just throw more generic data out at it and get a fairly decent response most of the time. If the more context you give it, the better it is. Sometimes it goes a little wild and hallucinates, so you gotta keep an eye on it.
Sure. So with that in mind, what was the solution that we built? How does it work?
Yeah, so what I've got right now, it's two components. So a component that works in Chrome that extracts data from our ticketing system, and then the other component is an agent, and that agent takes the data, the export from Chrome, and then it'll analyze all the different tickets. It reads the subject to see what's going on in the ticket, and then based on all that information, it looks to see which ones we should prioritize down. If there's any ones that we've not touched in a while, it takes all that into account and then outputs a top 10 list with a link that I can click on and just start drilling down and running with that.
So then, what have been the results so far? What have we seen with the tool that you're? I mean, it's still in development.
Yeah,
right?
I'm still developing it out. It's I'm trying not to spend too much time on it, so I've not, especially lately, worked on it much.
Sure.
But yeah, so I mean, in the first glean of what we're seeing here is pretty promising. I thought it was going to be a lot more work. I mean, there still is a lot more work to do, but we're already getting good results out of this. We're like, I can get a compact list of tickets and just start working through them. There is some other refinement that I want to start doing. Where making sure it's not missing anything. Making sure it truly is adhering to all the SLAs that we've got. Just really triple checking and making sure that nothing gets missed.
Sure. Let's dive in there for a minute, right? Because obviously these things are work in progress.
Yep.
As we've already heard, agents, they need guardrails. It's a recipe. You have to build that and refine that. And that's sort of your area of expertise here, right?
I mean,
more or less.
I truly, I don't think anybody's really like an expert in AI yet. Like everything is so brand new. It's like the Wild West out there. I mean, there's people that are learning, but I kind of question anybody that says they're an expert on all of this. There's a chance, but I put it at a pretty slim chance.
For sure. So let's walk through some of the challenges that you face in developing this tool in particular. I assume if you're anything like me, you sat down and you're asking the AI, how do I do this, right? Or what sort of recipe do I need to build?
Yep.
So how did that go for you, and what sort of challenges have you faced along the way?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it was various brainstorming, and yeah, I did reach out to the AI, so I used the chat portion of it and theorized, hey, is there a way that we can do this? And I mean, of course, I was going to tell you yes. So that's another issue you kind of got to be wary of. It's gung ho about yeah, we're going to help you out. We can do whatever you want.
Sure.
But it was actual in this case because I was able to create the tools and export this data and
I think that however they put AI together in most instances, whether it's Copilot or GPT or Grok or whatever, I think it wants to be helpful, right? That's the way that they designed it to act. It is designed.
It is trained to be helpful. Right. Always help the user.
Right, but it's like, sure, I can do that even if it's not 100% sure how, right?
Yep.
So with that, something that I love about AI is the iterative process, right? You ask a question and you get an answer, but from there you have to validate the answer. You have to make sure that it's contextualized. You have to figure out, how accurate it is in many cases. There are countless,
it's got
horror stories about that.
100% confidence about everything it says.
Yeah,
whether or not it's accurate. Yeah, you definitely have to double check, triple check.
Yeah.
Make sure what it's saying is right.
So with where you are now, understanding this is still a work in progress, this particular tool, it is something that we are utilizing and continuing to refine and test. But what do you think the future looks like in this particular case?
Yeah, so to me, what the future will be, instead of having like a third-party custom extension in Chrome that extracts this data, we're going to integrate it into our software so that we can just pull this data, it pipes it out on the back end to one of these agents, and then the agent will autonomously look at the data, and then it'll autonomously pipe it back into our ticketing system. So all that is just sort of autonomous. You don't even look at it. It just works. It runs. Here's your list, run down it.
So that's the dream, I guess.
That's where we're going to be eventually.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. Well, Hayden, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate your insight on this issue.
Absolutely.
All right, Mike, welcome back. What we want to talk about now is a pretty cool tool that we've built and we're using here internally. I know that you're using it pretty heavily lately. And that is what we're calling our summary statement agent, right? So to go back to where we started with what an AI agent is, walk us through the issue that we were facing and what the thinking was and how we wanted to incorporate AI.
So AI has a funny way of thinking. It does not create the same results every time. You'll ask it the same question and, I kid you not, different results. So that's where you need someone to write these recipes. These are these agents, and it takes time to fine tune them and to get the results within a reasonable scope of output.
Right, in terms of consistency, right?
Yeah.
And so consistency was an issue that we were facing
Exactly.
internally with our sort of summary statements. So walk us through what the problem was.
So consistency with closing statements on a large project or work order where there was many pieces and people involved, and we can scan this whole thing with AI, make sure we didn't miss anything, focus all of our time instead of looking for what are we missing to wrapping up those last loose ends before we close the ticket.
Right. So the main idea was then that we could sort of standardize and automate really sort of the final takeaways for any projects that we were doing, no matter how many people worked on it or how long it took. And so what were the benefits of something like that for us here at Accent as well as for our clients?
Yeah, so it goes back to the fine details that you need to track very closely. AI is going to bring all that up to a zoom level where you can see the forest for the trees without getting stuck in the leaves.
Nice. So how does it work? That's what everybody wants to know, right? How does it work? What does it do?
Yeah, so
how do we use it? I guess maybe a better way to ask.
We are using AI to reduce the friction, the static that we pick up when we put our hands on the keyboard and the mouse. We've got a lot of typing and a lot of clicking to do, and AI at its simplest is going to reduce that drastically.
So when we think about potential outcomes of this, right, I think we're already seeing that our ticket closure times are being cut down by at least 50%.
Even more sometimes.
Yeah, and there's a consistency, right, which in terms of the value that we want to deliver to our clients, we want to have sort of formatting and certain types of language so that at the end of a project, we're able to say, hey, here's what we did. And it's not going to be dependent upon, who led the project or who worked on the project or how long the project took. It's just going to have some uniformity, reduce that friction of, okay, well, I got to come up with a format and do all those things. So then with that recipe that we built, it's doing that for us. So it's analyzing each ticket and sort of outputting that data at the very end, right? So in your mind, what is the big takeaway from this particular tool?
The takeaway is the whole industry is changing quite a bit with AI. And you want to be ahead of the game at the table. You want to make sure that you have the right people facilitating the resources you need. So it takes somebody who really understands behind the curtain to make the magic of AI true reality.
So what I hear you saying actually is interesting because I think there's this idea with some people that AI is going to replace humanity, right? Where the robots are coming for us, right? So, but in the way that you're describing it, there's a very essential human layer to all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. You need a human gateway to make sure that the AI is not getting out of the pen, so to speak.
Getting out of the pen, so it's like a wild animal.
You really need to, you got to train it. It takes time.
Yeah, well, cool. Well, thanks so much, Mike. I appreciate your insights in this particular tool set.
Yeah, thanks, Nick.
All right. Now that you've had a chance to hear a little bit more about how we're using AI here internally at Accent, I wanted to change the pace a little bit. So for our next segment, we'll be sitting down with Everett Whiteman. Everett's our service manager here and is a really awesome guy who's been in the IT and technology space for a long time. So I kind of wanted to pick his brain a little bit about AI broadly, and then also some specifics as it relates to the conversations we've already had. I hope you'll enjoy. All right, well, I'm joined now by Everett Whiteman. Everett, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I've been with Accent for about 5 years now, actually 5 years here in a couple weeks. So I started out as one of our DSKs, working on the help desk team, and now I operate the service desk team in full.
Well, as you think about your role in managing our service team, what are you seeing in AI here at Accent that's noteworthy, that's interesting? How, what's your take on how we're implementing AI today?
Yeah, a lot of our implementation at this point is focused around making us better, more efficient, looking at reducing our risks, and also just making us better as a group, more consistent in our service delivery.
So what is it that got, what's your interest level in AI, right? I think we've talked about how people can be kind of all over the spectrum in terms of, I guess not just how interested they are in AI, but how like open they are to employing it themselves. So where do you fall in that range?
Yeah, I mean, AI certainly has its place for us. We've found value in what we've done with it so far. I'm excited to see where it goes from here, for sure.
But you and I had some interesting conversation not too long ago that actually kind of prompted this particular session, just in terms of sort of widespread response to AI, right? So I'm probably one of those people who's more excited about it, who sees opportunity and how can we, capture it and define it and utilize it in a way that's beneficial. But you've said that you've experienced or heard about like fatigue with AI.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of being shoehorned into every one of our products that we used, and whether you want it there or not, it's certainly being implemented one way or another. And so, to some degree, people are certainly getting a little burnt out on it. And some people are more skeptical of it. Some people are fearful of it, and all things considered. And we see a wide variety of that in a given week, for sure.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, though, is just like the ubiquity of AI. Right. In some of the promo content for this session, we talked about how, AI is on your wrist. It's in your pocket. It's on my kitchen counter in my Alexa. It's not even something that necessarily, it's in our cars. You know what I mean? It's everywhere. And so there's this sort of universality to it. But then, like, when you think about harnessing that in a business context, I think really where the rubber meets the road in a lot of ways is in the idea. And so we spent a lot of time in today's session talking about use cases. That's where I want to start with you today. Sure. When you think about really developing a good idea, a use case scenario for AI, how do you approach that as a technician, as someone who has a rich experience in IT?
Sure. Yeah. So the best problems for AI to solve at this point are problems that are repetitive in nature. You can totally eliminate those in most cases with an AI implementation that's well thought through and well processed. And so those are generally the most successful ones across the board. But tapping into like data warehousing and all that kind of thing too, there's certainly room for those opportunities as well. But right out the gate, what we've seen so far is the best solutions are ones that are solving tasks that are just monotonous and repetitive.
So again, as you think about going from an idea to something that's functional, what are the important steps along the way?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously there's gotchas with it. There's things that just won't do yet. We're a little ahead of the technology of our time in some ways, but no idea is necessarily a bad idea when it comes to AI, because AI is moving so fast that ideas that were thought impossible a year ago are now possible with certain solutions. So certainly want to encourage people to bring ideas forward with implementations for AI potentials.
Now, in your experience, as you think about misconceptions related to AI in this space, what are some that you find yourself running into more often?
Yeah, people kind of blindly trust it is probably the biggest one. For sure.
Well, explore that with me, right? Like walk through that. What are the outcomes of that, and why is it a sort of a dangerous misconception?
Yeah, I mean, bad data in equals bad data out, right? So, you can't just blindly trust whatever it tells you unless you know for a fact that the data you provided to it is good and valid.
Well, I think I think the one of the common things that you hear about is like AI is taking over. It's replacing people's jobs, and it's it's the enemy in a lot of ways. But I think that there's still this necessary human component,
for sure,
because we've seen AI hallucinate. We've seen it just. I mean, it's fundamental goal, I think. And if you've used Grok or ChatGPT or Copilot or any of the more popular tools, it's designed to give you a dopamine hit every time you ask it something, right? And so you're asking a question. It's like, that's the most genius thing I've ever heard. And I'm like, no, that's actually not a great idea. I was really hoping that you would jump off from there. But I think that like it wants to be helpful. And so you're more inclined to, when you get feedback, to trust it. I think that's maybe people who don't really understand. But like you have to validate.
You have to validate.
You have to second, and there are great stories out this. I mean, there was an example a few years ago of an attorney who filed a brief. It was, I think, kind of all over the news and kind of famous, but they had filed a brief and asked ChatGPT or whatever it was to find court cases, and it did, but they were all complete fiction,
nonsense.
And so that lawyer looked very dumb. And there was a very significant lawsuit resulting from that. But I think that as we look at AI, to your point, I think like the risk is in trusting it too much, right? So I think you're spot on there. What else have you seen, like in terms of kind of misconceptions around AI?
Necessarily being able to replace people is not necessarily true. It certainly can replace some jobs. Like we talked about, it's not necessarily there to do people's jobs in full yet in a lot of ways, but certainly a lot of functions of people's jobs it can certainly replace.
Yeah, because I think that's where AI comes in. We talked about this a little bit in the lead up to this conversation. In focusing on some of those repetitive things that if you can just define the parameters and the expectations for AI, it can save you time, right? And then gets the monotony and sort of just the stuff that nobody really likes to do off your plate, so that you can become more well resourced with time and energy to focus on more important tasks. So
the most ideal outcome for it would be letting it upskill you, right? If you can have it do the tasks that you don't necessarily want to do, or the ones that take up the most of your time, to give you time to do what you really want to do, and ultimately upskill you and make you better. That's really the best win across the board for any AI implementation.
Yeah, for sure. Now let's talk about developing. Like once you have the use case, you've got the idea. Let's talk about collaboration, right? Which is one of my favorite topics as it relates to AI. But at your level, when you're looking at AI implementations for our clients, and even internally, who should be in the room? Who are the stakeholders?
Yeah, obviously the people that want to see the outcomes there, the ones that are the big thinkers, we love to have them at the table, ask them questions and get their input. But you got to have some realists in the room too. So the people that kind of know what's going on behind the scenes, know where the data lives, know where the data kind of operates and how it gets to where it gets. All those people are necessary to have in the room as well, just to kind of get all on the same page and know expectations and also know the limitations of it as well.
Because you want some leadership there, right? Because they understand, I think maybe generally speaking, the goal, the mission of these implementations. But I think to your point, the realists, and what you're talking about is the people who are doing the work, right? The people who understand, like you said, where the data lives, how the processes work, and ultimately what success might look like in real time. So to that, what are the things that those different stakeholders can miss in the process? Like, where are those gaps that that it's as IT consultants that we can help fill?
Cost is a big one for sure. Not necessarily knowing what it's going to cost going into it, and kind of be able to put numbers to that, and kind of making sense of things like tokens that are kind of complex and unnecessarily so, but we can kind of bring clarity to those and translate.
Speaking of translating, for those who aren't familiar with what you just said, what is a token?
Yeah, a token's effectively how they calculate what's being used on the back end. So in layman's terms, that's effectively what it is. So we obviously speak in words and all that happens, but on the back end, the AI queries things and it has to kind of keep tabs on what it's actually using and utilizing. And so those are effectively tokens at a high level.
Gotcha. Well, as you think about being in that room and you're talking about AI implementation, and you've got the people doing the work and the people who are looking to oversee these projects, I'm curious, what's the way that we can help assist like the technical feasibility of a project with sort of the business expectation?
Yeah. I mean, obviously having developers at the table can kind of realize what's going on and bring it full circle with those teams. And maybe it's not possible right now. Again, that's absolutely one of the cases and outcomes that we're going to see. But nothing wrong with bringing ideas forward at the end of the day, for sure.
Yeah. Well, as we think about that, in prototyping and scaling AI, what are some of the emergent technologies that you're most excited about?
Yeah, obviously code writing is huge right now. That's really one of the hot topics of AI, really across the board. We're seeing it from all the major ones like Claude and ChatGPT as well. And so as that gets better, obviously that's going to make developers' lives a little bit easier, the ones that utilize it. But also you still need developers to kind of check it as well. It's not a one and done thing for sure.
Yeah. I think like for my use case that I talked through, it was this like AI sort of training tool. And there was a lot of, and I talked about this in my session, but like a lot of iteration had to go
Mhm.
into it, right? Because you want to define those parameters and those expectations. What are some ways that you're seeing where AI can even assist in that process?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean that's where agents kind of come into play, where you're kind of teaching somebody how to do those roles, and that just takes time. It's like training an employee one-on-one. You got to train the AI as well for it to be accurate and consistent.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to where we started our conversation, just in terms of like not just blindly trusting it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I think that's like the ever-present danger in this whole AI conversation,
Yeah,
because like it
yeah.
wants to make you happy,
Yeah.
it wants to be helpful,
Yep.
but then like it's just gonna fill gaps where
Yeah.
it finds them, and so
Yep.
you have to figure out where those are.
Yeah.
But then even being able to ask it, be like, okay, what
Yeah.
additional information
For
do
sure.
you need?
Yeah.
And I think that's not something that, because again, like the risk is you just go, hey, I need this thing, and then it says, okay, here you go, and they're
Yeah.
like, cool, good, we're
Yeah.
excellent here.
Yep.
But then like actually having to implement it and use it day to day, you
Yeah.
can pretty quickly figure out where the gaps are.
Yeah, I was in a meeting the other day, and the person I was talking to called it an overconfident intern. I thought that was very funny.
The overconfident
I was
intern.
like, that's perfect.
I like that.
Yeah.
Now, of course, when we talk about trust of AI, for us that comes into responsibility,
Yeah.
right? Because there are ethical considerations, there are
For
risk
sure.
considerations.
Yep.
So, what does responsible AI look like here at Accent Consulting?
Yeah. So it all starts with acceptable use policies. If the service is free, the product is me, in a lot of these AI tools. And so you start putting data into it that is company intellectual property or private to the company, into one of these free tools. There's a good chance it's going to use that data to train its model and make itself better. But at the same time, that comes at the cost of your company's data and your intellectual property.
So, how do you adjust to that?
Yeah, so acceptable use policies are obviously the best thing to do there to start it out, just to heavily discourage people from doing those kinds of things and putting data into the tools. But yeah, that's really.
Well, what resources are available otherwise? Like if you have to, if we're talking about defining parameters and setting expectations and giving AI the tools that it needs to actually be helpful, how can you protect yourself from just giving your data or any sort of proprietary information to the AI, I guess?
Yeah, it starts with picking out the good tool set. And what I mean by that is you pick a tool set that makes sense, that's trusted and reputable, low risk kind of things, but also vetting those companies themselves to make sure that they adhere to good policies and procedures as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and they were talking about, it was a journalist, right, talking about like different sources being on background or being off the record. And so I think that we've heard of some instances where people will just dump troves of data into these things, be like, oh wait, don't use that, like but then it's there, it's too late, right? So you have to be way out in front of that and making sure that you're using tools that you can trust that are going to protect your information and your sensitive data.
Yep, for sure.
So here at Accent, how are we doing that?
Yeah, we do a lot of governance. So obviously it comes down to permissions here too. HR files and that kind of stuff are locked down to that department. But we also kind of keep AI's hands off on a lot of that stuff. We're a Microsoft shop here. And so we've restricted Copilot down in its access to only files that make sense. And so it has no access to anything that's even remotely confidential in a lot of our systems.
But that's not like an out of the box selection of settings. So that's again another place where if you're considering AI within your context, doing so with the right preventative measures in place can be, I mean, it is and should be like job one.
This should be a very first step for sure, for a lot of things. Yep.
Okay, so let's get practical, right? We've talked high level about some things. If someone wanted to start an AI project, they've got an idea, they've got a use case, now what?
Yeah, ideally bring us in. We'd love to chat with you a little bit about it and see what you got, if it's possible. We've got people on staff here that kind of know the ins and outs, and we'll be glad to talk with you in more detail about that.
Yeah, and why, broadly speaking, why is it important to bring an IT consultant like Accent Consulting in? I mean, we've talked about security, we've talked about risk and those things, but I mean, what are some of the high-level functional outcomes that they could hope to achieve by partnering?
Yeah, when we consult, we're looking at protecting, saving, and making revenue. And so part of the protecting side of that consultancy is looking at your risks and assessing those for you. And so we've been doing this for a couple of years now, really, and so we've gotten pretty good at it. I'd like to think so, anyways, and want to keep doing that. And we'd love to kind of share that knowledge and make sure our companies we work with are protected and safe as well.
One of the points I really liked that one of our techs made was about the idea that if someone says they're an AI expert, it's difficult to really buy into that, really
Yeah.
to believe those people. So,
Yeah.
obviously I think we understand that AI is this ever evolving
Yeah.
solution, and we're adjusting to it as quickly as it's adjusting to us.
Sure.
And so, I don't know that we would necessarily walk in and be like, oh yeah, like, in terms of AI, we've got it all figured out, because we're
Yeah.
still iterating
We
through a lot of
absolutely
our own
not.
ideas. But,
Yep.
from a security standpoint, from, just a design standpoint as well, I think we're further along in that journey than someone firing it up for the first time, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with what I was doing in the HR tool, like, it was pretty, low budget in terms of what we were trying to accomplish. But I think the general expectation shouldn't be that someone can just sit down and go alone and have something that's going to be secure and again, protect their revenue, drive revenue and scale.
Yeah, it needs to be vetted through and through.
Yeah, for sure. As we think about that, what are the most common mistakes that people are making in your experience?
Yeah, kind of like you talked about, dumping troves of data into it right out the gate. Like you kind of said, it's too late at that point. It's already far gone, and there's no getting that data back. Much like posting pictures on the internet and whatnot, and stuff that you wouldn't want out there. Treat it like it's public as soon as you give it to it, unless your tool has been set up in a way that it's validated not sharing data and it's protecting what you talk about with it.
Yeah, but beyond that, as they're in the actual development phase, what are some of those kind of key challenges?
Yeah, obviously AI developed code especially has plenty of risks. We're tracking vulnerabilities right now with a platform modulator thing that is from a lot of these tools, and so the Node platform is just it's used commonly in code that's written by AI, and so that kind of stuff just happens, and people that don't know better are going to fall for it.
Gotcha. How do you see, switching gears a little bit, but as we think about the future of AI, and it's difficult to pin that down because the present is changing so quickly, but where do you see maybe that next big step in AI evolution? Obviously we know what we know, but like, what's that next generation of AI?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about. It's hard to predict, too, like we kind of talked about. But obviously faster, more accurate, more consistent across the board. That's happening daily, to be honest, at this point. And but really, the next big steps are a little bit more agentic AI, and just actually like being knowledgeable and being truly creative. Because right now it's a lot of data in, data out. And so it's not great at creating new things aside from things like images and whatnot based on prompts. But
it makes a solid meme,
It does, yeah, it does.
But I think it's interesting too, because I had this conversation with some friends recently. I don't know what to trust anymore.
Yeah.
Right? Because you'll be on social media or you'll see different images or graphics, whatever, and everything now I'm just like, is that real?
Yeah.
Did that actually happen? Did that shark really jump onto that boat, or was that AI? And so I think it's like, that's what I'm curious about, to see how AI will sort of blur some of those lines. I've talked about with friends as well. Like, I think that there's going to be a time at which, like, you think about like Made in America, right? Like, that's like a badge you put on something, and it's like, hey, this is a high quality product. There's this assumed benefit from being this made. I feel like there's going to be something similar where it's like, this was made without AI or something. Like, there's going to be this pushback against it, which isn't to say that like AI is invaluable or whatever, but I mean, like, I think that it's going to be this interesting cultural sort of battle in and around AI as people use it, but then they're always bad actors, right?
Yeah,
so you're trying to figure out how to hedge against that, both mentally and pragmatically in business context, right? Have you thought much about that?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of that from like script writers and whatnot for the big content producers, going on strike and whatnot, and feeling threatened by it for sure. A lot of creatives are certainly feeling threatened by it. And,
well, I'm a marketing guy, so that's the world that I live in terms of content and all that kind of thing. And you try to have this idea that the content you're putting out is going to be authentic and it's going to be accurate. But then you've got AI. It's just like, I want to make you happy, so whatever you want, buddy. Like, you can
overconfident intern.
You can have it, right? Whatever you need, I'm here. What is it about? Like, what's the thing that maybe excites you most about an AI-driven future? We talk about like where it's going and all that, but like, what's the thing that really is like, that's what I want to latch onto, and I think what can really make our partners or even our own organization more successful.
Yeah, especially here in this office, and is getting our data organized Not that we're disorganized right now, there's just a lot of it. And so I kind of envision a future where we are able to ask questions of our own data and then make choices and decisions based upon that accurately and consistently. And then it results in better service delivery, more consistent service delivery, and ultimately faster service delivery too.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. Like being able to say, hey, this is our data, look at it unilaterally, right? And think about, what trends we can identify that maybe your average IT guy isn't going to see.
Yeah.
That's very exciting. I do like that idea.
Yeah, for sure. Looking at our metrics for the year here, we've created over 500 knowledge-based articles across all of our partners we work with. That's a lot of data. There's a lot that we can search for and kind of get the answers, but it takes a lot of time. And so being able to take all of that data and drop it into one singular platform you can ask questions of and have it give you consistent answers, that's huge.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much, Everett, for jumping in and having this conversation. Really appreciate your insight. Any parting thoughts?
Not at this point.
Not at this point. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in, and hopefully we can set up a time to chat and go from there and see how these use cases can come together in functional, trustworthy, revenue generating or protecting tools.
Yep.
Excellent. Sure. All right. Thanks. All right. Thanks so much, Everett, for sitting down with me and having that really interesting conversation on AI. I hope that you all enjoyed listening to it as much as I did having it. Of course, we'd love to keep the conversation going with you. So if you registered for today's session, thanks so much. We're going to follow up with a recording, and we're also going to include something we call our AI Quick Start Guide. It's a helpful tool that you can use to get from where you are to where you want to go in this AI conversation, and we hope that it's a valuable resource for you. Of course, if you didn't sign up, we'd be happy to send that over. We also have a number of other AI-related guides and pamphlets that we'd be happy to share. But really, we want to have a conversation about this. As you heard from our text, it's usually a great idea to have someone go along on this journey with you, someone with the experience and the know-how to make sure that your AI implementation is safe and effective and valuable. We want to maximize that ROI. So we'd love to have you give us a call. Our number is 877-426-1337. We're standing by whenever to make sure that your questions get answered and that we can, again, be the guides for you on this AI journey. Of course, that's not all we do here. We are an IT solutions company. So if you have questions about cloud or networking or security, compliance, any of the things, we'd be happy to help with that as well. But on behalf of myself and everyone here at Accent Consulting, again, we want to say thank you for joining us. We hope we get to talk to you soon.